Secretary Clinton, first of all, welcome back to South Carolina. It's always such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. It's always a delight to be here.
Awesome. And today's town hall meeting at Claflin University was amazing, moderated by Roland Martin. One of the things I loved is you guys just went right into it. You had to stop him at one point because you said, wait a minute, you're talking so fast. But I wanted to start off with economics. Mm-hmm. You said that President Obama doesn't get nearly the credit he deserves for digging us out of the financial bind that he inherited.
That's right.
What would you do to expand on what he has done so far as that's concerned?
Well, I say this everywhere I go because the Republicans are trying to act like they had nothing to do. Their failed economic policies did not contribute to the mess we found ourselves in, and of course it did. And so the president, when he came into office, was confronting an economy that was losing 800,000 jobs a month. And what he did through the steps that he took with congressional action, with executive action, was to stabilize everything so it didn't get worse. It could have been a Great Depression, not just a Great Recession. And then we began digging ourselves out of the hole. So what I like to say is that we're standing, but we're not yet running. So what I want to do is to build on the progress and, the economic policies that Democrats know work, because when a Democrat's in the White House, the economy does better. And that means we've got to focus on not just getting more jobs, but good paying jobs where you have rising incomes. We need to raise the minimum wage because it is a poverty wage right now. Mm-hmm. We need to get equal pay for equal work for women, because if you don't pay women what they have earned, it hurts them, it hurts their families, it hurts the economy. I want to see more businesses do profit sharing. So if you're contributing to a profitable enterprise, it doesn't just help those on the top, it helps everybody who's part of the workforce. I want to do more to help small businesses. I think that it was hard to do that while we were digging ourselves out of the ditch, but now we have to do more to help small businesses because they are the main creators of jobs in America.
Definitely. And something that you said today was that, and something I didn't know, is that someone can get fired for asking someone at their job what their salary is.
That's
and
right.
You said there should be more transparency so that you can know what your salary is compared to someone doing the same job.
That's right. I mean, companies are allowed to retaliate, and that may not always lead to firing, but it could mean you don't get a promotion, or it could mean that you're docked your pay, or you don't get the overtime you're entitled to. But companies can retaliate because companies want to keep salary information private. There are maybe some positive reasons for that, but the net effect is that people don't know when they're not being treated fairly. So yes, we need more transparency on pay levels in the workforce.
Okay. And we did get a report this week that the unemployment rate has gone down, which is great, but you say the unemployment rate has gone down, but pay has not gone up.
That's
what can
right.
we do about that?
Well, I am relieved that unemployment has gone down, but it hasn't gone down as far in lots of communities, like communities of color, as it has nationally. So we still have a higher unemployment rate among African Americans, for example, and particularly among young people as well. So we've got to do more to get more jobs, but we also have to make sure that those jobs are creating a ladder of opportunity into the middle class for people who are willing to work hard. So everything I'm proposing is based on really solid economic experience. My husband ended his 8 years with 23 million new jobs, but also incomes went up everywhere. They went up for the top, the middle, working folks, and poor people. More people were lifted out of poverty. And we were on the right track until George W. Bush came in and totally reversed course, cutting taxes on the super wealthy, waging wars without paying for them, and creating the environment in which the financial markets and the mortgage markets went under the way they did. So President Obama's gotten us back to the starting line, and now we all have to run hard, and we need to do what will work.
Okay, which is one of the things you mentioned was we have to recruit, train, and hire people from disadvantaged communities.
Yes, right. This is a big passion of mine. I started a program at the Clinton Foundation when I was there before I started running for president, called Job One. We have 6 million young people between the ages of 16 and 24 who are neither at work or in school. that first job you get, that can teach you so much, not just the skills of the job, but, showing up on time, how you treat your coworkers, how you dress. Every young person has to have that experience. Otherwise, you don't know what you're supposed to do in the world of work. And we have millions of kids who don't have that opportunity now. And I just feel like we've had a disconnect between the work world and young people. And so part of my challenge that I am going to address is how we get more young people into work experience. Internships are great, but if you're a poor kid, you can't afford to work for nothing. So I want more paid programs for young people to get work experience. That's why I promote apprenticeships, because you should be paid for learning. It's not just going out and learning, because that's not available for everybody. So I have a lot of ideas, and some of them are working in other parts of our country, and we need to take what works and provide it for more people.
Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about criminal justice reform. One of the things you touched on today was that it's a proven fact that African American men are arrested and jailed for the same things that their white counterparts do, but don't get arrested and jailed for.
Right.
Talk a little bit about what we can do. I told you earlier that I spoke with Andrew Young, and one of the things he said is that we really have to focus on treating people, equally and giving them equal opportunities. He said, but that's going to take training.
Right.
What
He's
type
right.
of
Andrew Young is right about that. It will take training. In my criminal justice reform policy, I recommend that we do a lot more training, that we have regional training programs funded and supported by the federal government, so that states, if they're big states, they would do it in their states, but if they're smaller states, they would come together with other similar states, because we need to retrain our police force to deal with some of the new problems and stresses in the world today. We need to be sure the new recruits are screened and capable of doing the work that requires discretion and good judgment. And, I believe that there's something, it's like that example of the young girl who was thrown to the ground in the school here in South Carolina. Something is missing in the training and preparation of people in positions of authority, whether they're in schools or they're on police forces. We've got to get back to working through some of the scenarios that will be encountered. I mean, I'm not excusing bad behavior. I'm not excusing lack of discipline, but I am criticizing inappropriate ways of dealing with that, whether it's on the streets or in communities. And I think maybe it's the media influence. I think that police officers are too quick to pick up a weapon when either that's not necessary or there is another alternative. I want to, in these training programs, also focus on keeping police officers safe, because they do have some bad actors they have to deal with. But to know the difference, and sometimes these are split-second decisions, and therefore the more training, the more practice, the more ability to kind of size up a situation. Is this guy running away a threat to other people? Really? Let's kind of be more careful in using force. So that's why I agree completely with Andrew Young, and that's why I'm proposing that we have a new, robust training program.
Okay. And that leads to my question about gun violence and gun laws. You stated today that 90 people a day die from an issue with a gun.
Yeah, that's right.
I know that you are a proponent of the background checks. What else can we do in that area to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them?
Right. Well, I think we start with the background checks because there's very high support, not only among a majority of Americans, but a majority of gun owners for background checks. And we need to get rid of the loopholes, and we need to improve the technology so that information is entered into these systems and it can be readily checked. That's what unfortunately didn't happen with the Charleston murders. This young man shouldn't have ever gotten a gun, but he is entitled under a loophole I do not approve of. Within 3 days, you get the gun no matter what, and the information hadn't yet been collected. So we need to have universal background checks. We need to close the gun show loophole. Just because you go to a gun show doesn't mean you shouldn't be subject to background checks. We should close the open market that online purchases provide. There's got to be some checks and balances there, and we should close the Charleston loophole. And we should end the unique immunity from liability that gun makers and sellers have. Now, this liability does not apply to any other industry or profession in our country. It doesn't matter what you make. If you make a car and it blows up, you're held accountable. If you are working in a bar and you keep feeding drinks to somebody and they go out and cause an accident, you can be brought into the lawsuit. If you're a gun maker and you refuse to use new technology that will only operate a gun with the owner's fingerprint or the owner knowing how to make it work, and it falls in the hand of a toddler, you're not held to account. If you are an ammunition seller online and the murderer from Aurora, Colorado goes online and buys thousands of bullets and he has severe mental illness, the parents of one of the victims of his shooting in the theater sued because they said this is wrong, you should have some responsibility. They lost that lawsuit. So I want to get common sense provisions governing liability again.
And you got a big round of applause because obviously we're at a college when you started talking about education, and you have a new college compact.
Yes.
Can you tell us what that entails?
I want to make college affordable, and I want to get the debt down so that young people are not saddled by debt for decades. Making it affordable means we will provide funding so that if you go to a public college or university, you will not have to borrow money for tuition. And if you are at an HBCU, you will get extra help because I feel that those institutions are performing a great public service. And you will be able to refinance your debt because right now people are paying exorbitant interest rates and the federal government is making money off of student debt. I want to end that.
Okay. And you said about refinancing student debt, which is awesome. Okay.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about the expansion of Medicaid. Our governor here in South Carolina is totally against that. If you are elected, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm a little bewildered by it because some Republican governors have expanded Medicaid. In fact, the Republican governor of Alaska just expanded Medicaid recently. I know the governors of Alabama and I think one other Republican state are looking at it. It's a good deal. It's a good deal and it's the right thing to do. If your opposition is ideological, how can you look at all of the people who are denied health care because their only recourse is the emergency room? If you don't have a source of funding for poor working people to be able to afford through Medicaid, then people with other forms of insurance, like private insurance, end up paying the cost because the emergency room will take, thankfully, people in.
Right.
So it doesn't make financial sense, and it doesn't make ethical or moral sense to me that you wouldn't want to help the people in your own state who are predominantly from working families but can't afford private insurance to have access to that. So I will do everything I can to convince states like yours to expand Medicaid.
Okay. And to round off the interview, I want to talk about our youngest of people in our communities, our youth. I loved your saying, you said talent is universal, but opportunity is not. What can we do to help our young ones?
I think it starts at birth, and I think that we know there are some excellent programs that have been used in our country where home visitors, where trained lay people as well as experts like social workers or nurses begin interacting with families that may have some stresses. Maybe there's mental illness in the family, maybe there's been addiction and alcoholism, maybe one of the parents is in prison, and trying from the very beginning to help equip the parents to understand what they can do to better prepare their own baby. And I think for too long people thought, well, I just have to keep my baby healthy and safe and a roof over, his head and food on the table, and then they'll get to school and they'll start their education. But now we know from brain research that 80% of your brain is physically formed by the age of 3. So what happens in those first 3 years of life can determine whether a talented youngster has the opportunity or not. You know, there are always great stories of people overcoming terrible burdens, but if you really study those programs, something intervened. A parent, a grandparent, an aunt, an uncle, maybe a minister, maybe a coach, maybe a neighbor. Somebody intervened to really help that child get a better start. And so we need to get the community, once again, committing to help every child to fulfill his or her God-given potential. That will be my mission.
Awesome. And one last question. How is your baby? I know you have a new little one.
I do. I have a 13-month-old wonderful grandchild, and I get sent pictures every day so that I can, even though I'm not there, I can chart her progress, and she is just a sheer delight. And, you know, we've been reading, talking, and singing to her since she was born, and we do it because we love doing it. You know, we love her eyes lighting up, and now that she's a year, you know, she recognizes things, and she's got a few little words. It's so gratifying, but we also do it because we know it'll better prepare her to learn in later life.
Secretary Clinton, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Rhonda, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.